He counted the seconds between heartbeats. 17. Too many. His body was shutting down again, but Jack Miller had learned something after 3 captures, 3 escapes, and more close calls with death than any man deserved. The human spirit breaks before the body does. And Jack Miller refused to break. The first time they caught him was in France, 1944. Fresh out of Ohio, barely 19. Shot down over occupied territory. The Luftwaffe pilot who found him was young too. They stared at each other for what felt like hours, but was probably seconds. 2 boys playing war, except the guns were real. They marched him through villages where French civilians watched from behind curtains. Some with pity, some with fear. Most with that hollow look of people who'd seen too much. Jack memorized their faces. If he survived, he'd tell their story too. Stalag Luft 3rd wasn't hell. Hell would have been warmer. The guards called him Amerikaner, with the same tone you'd use for cockroach, but Jack noticed things. Guard rotations, fence weaknesses, the way snow muffled sound. Information was currency, and he was saving up. 3 months in, during a blizzard that turned the world white, Jack made his move. The guard tower couldn't see 10 feet. The dogs couldn't smell through the wind. He'd saved bits of wire, studied the fence until he knew every link. When the searchlight swept past, he had 47 seconds. He counted every one. The wire cut his hands to ribbons. Blood freezing before it could drip. Freedom tasted like copper and snow. He ran through forests that seemed endless, following stars when he could see them, instinct when he couldn't. For 9 days, he was a ghost moving through occupied Europe. A French resistance fighter found him half dead in a barn. She was 16, maybe 17, spoke 3 words of English. You, come, now. She hid him in root cellars, moved him between safe houses, fed him bread that tasted like hope. Her network got him to Spain, then Gibraltar, then back to his unit. His commanding officer looked at him like he'd seen a ghost. Miller? You're supposed to be dead. Jack's response became legend in the 8th Air Force. Death's gonna have to try harder than that, sir. They gave him a choice. Go home a hero, or go back up. Jack chose the sky, because the war wasn't over, because his crew needed pilots, because running from the Germans was one thing, but running from the fight was another. Some called it brave. Jack called it necessary. 6 weeks later, flak over Berlin tore his B-17 apart. As he floated down in his parachute watching his fortress burn, Jack Miller smiled. The Germans were about to learn they'd caught him once. Lightning doesn't strike twice, but Jack Miller? He was about to prove that some men strike as many times as it takes. The second capture was different. Berlin, March 1945. The war was ending. Everyone could feel it. But that made the Germans more desperate, more dangerous. They didn't take Jack to a Luftwaffe camp this time. They took him to the SS. The interrogation room smelled like fear and cigarettes. The officer across from him had eyes like winter, dead things pretending to be alive. He spoke perfect English, probably educated at Oxford or Harvard before the world went insane. Flight Lieutenant Miller, he said, reading from a file. The ghost of Stalag Luft 3, we've been hoping to meet you. They knew about his escape, about the French girl who helped him, about the safe houses. Jack's blood turned to ice. How many people would die because he got caught again? The officer smiled, reading his thoughts. Don't worry about your friends. We've already dealt with them. It was a lie. Had to be. But the doubt was poison, spreading through his mind. They kept him in solitary. A concrete box with no light. Time became meaningless. Was it days? Weeks? He counted heartbeats to stay sane, recited baseball statistics, his mother's apple pie recipe. Anything to keep his mind from breaking. Then came the bombing. Allied planes turning Berlin into rubble. The guards fled. The building shook like it was coming apart. Jack heard screaming, running, chaos. His cell door had been damaged, not much, but maybe enough. He dislocated his thumb, a trick another POW taught him, and worked his hand through the gap. Berlin was burning. The capital of the Third Reich looked like the world's end. Jack moved through the ruins like a ghost. Bodies everywhere, soldiers, civilians, children. He couldn't tell friend from enemy anymore. Everyone was just trying to survive. An old German woman found him hiding in a bombed-out church. She looked at his uniform, at the hunger in his eyes. Without a word, she gave him her dead son's clothes, pressed a piece of bread into his hand, pointed east. Later, Jack would wonder why she helped him. Maybe by then everyone was just tired of the killing. He walked for days, joined refugee columns heading away from the Russian advance. Nobody looked twice at another hollow-eyed survivor. He'd learned German in the first camp. Enough to blend in. Enough to disappear. At night, he'd stare at stars and wonder if his mother knew he was alive. Soviet troops found him outside Dresden, almost shot him when he started speaking English. They didn't believe his story until an American liaison officer arrived. The officer's first words, "Miller? Jesus Christ, you're supposed to be dead. Again." The war in Europe ended 3 weeks later. Jack was in a hospital in Paris when he heard, "Victory in Europe." The nurses celebrated, soldiers got drunk. Jack stared at the ceiling and wondered about the French girl, the old German woman. All the ghosts he'd left behind. They wanted to send him home. Medal ceremonies. War hero tours. His war was over, they said. Jack Miller had done enough. But there was still Japan, still men dying in the Pacific, still a war to win. When they asked what he wanted, Jack's answer shocked everyone. "I want to fly again. Different ocean. Same fight." They thought he was crazy. Maybe he was. But crazy was just another word for refusing to quit when quitting made sense. They sent him to the Pacific. New plane, new crew, same war, different sky. The Japanese fought differently than the Germans. No rules, no mercy. Death before dishonor wasn't just a saying. It was a promise. Jack flew out of Tinian, B-29 superfortress now, bigger than his old B-17. Tokyo runs, firebombing cities. He tried not to think about the people below. Tried to remember Pearl Harbor, Bataan. The Americans still dying on islands no one could pronounce. War wasn't about right or wrong anymore. It was about ending it. August 1945. Everyone whispered about a secret weapon. Something big. Jack's crew wasn't chosen for those missions. He watched Enola Gay take off on August 6th. Watched it come back. Heard the rumors. A whole city. Gone. One bomb. The world had changed and Jack felt it in his bones. His last mission was supposed to be routine. Bombing run over southern Japan, but routine was a word that had no meaning in Jack Miller's life. Mechanical failure. Engine fire. They made it to the coast before bailing out. Jack counted to 10 in the darkness. Pulled his chute. Felt that familiar jolt, his third time falling into enemy territory. The Japanese farmers who found him looked as tired as he felt. They tied him up but didn't beat him, walked him to their village. Children peered from doorways, women clutched babies, everyone waiting for the war to end. Everyone except the soldiers who arrived at sunset. These weren't farmers. These were Imperial Army, Bushido code. They'd fight until the Emperor told them to stop. And the Emperor hadn't spoken yet. They took Jack to a cave complex. Military prison carved into mountain rock. Guards who looked at him like he was already dead. The cell was smaller than Berlin, darker than Stalag Luft III. But Jack had learned things. How to make space in his mind bigger than any prison. How to find light in absolute darkness. How to keep hope alive when hope made no sense. He exercised in the dark. Push-ups, sit-ups, moving to stay sane. Then came the earthquake. Japan sits on fault lines. Earth moves. Mountains shift. Jack felt it building. A rumble that became a roar. The guards ran. The mountain shook. Rocks fell. And in the chaos, Jack noticed his cell door had shifted. Just inches. But inches were all he'd ever needed. He squeezed through, cut himself on rock, left skin behind, but free was free, no matter the price. The cave complex was chaos, guards dealing with damage, prisoners screaming. Jack moved through shadows, 3 captures, 3 chances. He wasn't getting a fourth. Outside, Japan looked different, defeated. He could see it in people's faces. The war was ending. Everyone knew but couldn't say. Jack stole clothes from a line, became another refugee, headed for the coast. 3 days later, he found American troops, army this time. They'd just landed. The war had ended while he was underground. Name and rank, the sergeant demanded, rifle pointed at Jack's chest. "Flight Lieutenant Jack Miller," he said. United States Army Air Force. Serial number? The sergeant lowered his weapon. Miller? The Miller? Holy hell. You're the guy who… Jack cut him off. Yeah. I'm the guy who keeps getting caught and the guy who keeps getting out. They flew him to a hospital ship. Doctors who looked at him like a medical miracle. Malnutrition, infections, injuries that should have killed him, but Jack Miller was apparently too stubborn to die. They pumped him full of medicine, fed him real food, tried to make sense of his story. 3 captures, 3 escapes, 2 different enemies. 1 man who refused to break. The intelligence officers came, wanted every detail, maps, locations, guard routines. Jack gave them everything. Memory was all he'd had in those cells. He'd made it count. Word spread through the fleet. The ghost who wouldn't stay caught. Sailors came to shake his hand. Marines who'd island hopped across the Pacific wanted to buy him drinks. Everyone wanted to hear the story, but Jack couldn't tell it. Not yet. Too fresh. Too raw. Too many ghosts. They found his mother. Telegraphed her. Your son is alive. She'd gotten that telegram 3 times now. 3 times she'd been told he was missing, presumed dead. 3 times she'd refused to believe it. Mothers know things. Hearts know truth. She'd kept his room exactly as he'd left it. The Navy psychologist wanted to talk about trauma, about adjustment, about what comes next. Jack stared at him. This clean-shaven man who'd never seen a camp, never counted heartbeats in the dark, never wondered if today was the day you broke. What comes next, Jack said, is I go home. But home was complicated. The America he'd left in 1943 didn't exist anymore. His friends were dead or changed. His girl had married someone else. Someone who came home when he was supposed to. The town threw him a parade, called him a hero. But Jack felt like a ghost haunting his own life. He'd dream about the camps, the wire, the guards, but also about the people who helped. The French resistance girl, the old German woman, even some guards who'd shown mercy when they didn't have to. War wasn't black and white. It was all shades of gray, painted in blood. They offered him medals, Purple Hearts, Distinguished Flying Cross, Prisoner of War Medal ×3. Jack took them. Put them in a box. Medals couldn't bring back his crew, couldn't erase the faces of the dead, couldn't make the nightmares stop, but they meant something to his mother. So he kept them for her. College on the GI Bill, everyone moving forward, building lives, having babies, creating the future. But Jack was stuck in the past. Every crowd felt like a camp. Every fence looked like a barrier. Every uniform made him want to run. Freedom, he learned, wasn't just about being outside the wire. One night, drunk on whiskey and memories, he called the Pentagon, asked a question that had haunted him. The French resistance girl, what happened to her? It took them 3 months to find out. She'd survived, lived, had a family, was teaching school in Marseille, the old German woman. No record. Lost in the chaos of Berlin's fall. Some ghosts stay ghosts. 1950. Korea. Another war. They called it a police action. Jack called it hell with different weather. He was flying cargo planes now. Air Transport Command. Ferrying supplies. Wounded. Body bags. The forgotten lifeline of war. He'd stayed in the reserves. Couldn't fully leave. Couldn't fully stay. When Korea started, they called him back. 30 years old. Ancient by pilot standards. But experienced. They needed men who'd seen the worst. Men who wouldn't break when things went wrong. Incheon to Seoul. Seoul to Busan. Back and forth. Watching another country tear itself apart. Different language. Same screams. Same blood. Same boys dying for reasons they didn't understand. Jack flew on. Then came the Chinese. Suddenly, the war wasn't winning. It was surviving. The retreat from Chosin Reservoir. Marines and soldiers frozen. Frostbite taking more casualties than bullets. Jack flew in supplies. Flew out wounded. Watched America taste defeat. His C-47 took fire over Mig Alley. Russian-built fighters. Chinese pilots. Same result. Engine burning. Losing altitude. Crew chief already dead. Co-pilot bleeding out. Jack nursing a dying bird toward friendly lines. Almost made it. Almost never counted. Crash landing in no man's land. Between UN forces and Chinese lines, Jack pulled his co-pilot from the wreckage. Kid from Alabama, 22. Crying for his mother, Jack carried him, dragged him, refused to leave him. 2 miles through snow, through hell, through memory. Chinese patrol found them at dawn. Jack's hands were frozen to the kid's jacket. Had to pry them apart. The kid was already dead, had been for hours. Jack had been carrying a corpse, refusing to let go. Some habits die harder than the men who make them. This time felt different. Older. Tired. The Chinese didn't see him as anything special. Just another American. Another prisoner. Another mouth to feed in a war nobody understood. They marched him north, toward camps that made Stalag Luft 3 look like paradise. But Jack Miller had learned things. How to survive on nothing. How to find hope in darkness. How to wait. Always wait. The right moment always came. You just had to be ready. Had to be patient. Had to remember that giving up was the only true defeat. The march took weeks. Men died every day. Frozen, starved, broken. Jack helped when he could. Shared food he didn't have. Warmth that didn't exist. Hope that made no sense. Because that's what you did. That's how you fought back. One small kindness at a time. They never made it to the permanent camps. UN forces counterattacked. Artillery turned mountains into volcanoes. In the chaos, guards fled. Prisoners scattered. Jack found himself free again, but free in North Korea in winter was just another kind of prison. He headed south, always south, toward an idea of safety that might not exist. The Korean winter was a killer without conscience. 40 below. Wind that cut through everything. Jack had escaped the Chinese, but escaping nature was another matter. He moved at night, hid during the day, followed frozen rivers, navigate by stars older than any war. A Korean family found him unconscious in their barn. They could have turned him in, gotten food, rewards. Instead, they hid him, fed him. The grandmother had lost 3 sons already. She looked at Jack and saw another mother's boy. War makes enemies. Suffering makes humans. They kept him for 2 weeks, teaching him enough Korean to survive. The children drew him pictures. Universal language of innocence. When Chinese patrols came too close, they moved him, passed him to another family, then another, an underground railroad of humanity. Each family risked everything. Death for helping an American, but they helped anyway, because sometimes being human matters more than being safe. Jack memorized their faces, their kindness, promised himself he'd find a way to pay it back, somehow, someday. He made it to UN lines during a snowstorm. American sentries almost shot him. Beard, filthy, speaking broken Korean. He had to recite his serial number 3 times before they believed him. When they finally understood, one young private just shook his head. "Sir, you're supposed to be dead." "I get that a lot," Jack replied. They sent him to Japan, hospitals again, debriefings again, intelligence officers who wanted to know about Chinese positions, tactics, morale, Jack told them. But he also told them about the families, the kindness, the proof that people were still people even in war. The psychiatrist this time was younger. Korean War vet himself. He understood better. 4 times, Lieutenant Miller. 4 captures, 4 escapes. What drives you? Jack thought about it. Really thought. Stubbornness, he finally said. And maybe the belief that every trap has an exit. You just have to find it. They wanted to make him famous again, tour stateside, sell war bonds, tell his story to raise morale. Jack refused. He'd had enough of being a symbol, enough of being special. He just wanted to fly, to be useful, to matter without the spotlight. But his war was over. Really, over this time. They wouldn't let him fly combat anymore. Too valuable. Too symbolic. Too likely to get captured again. They gave him a training position, teaching young pilots, passing on lessons learned in blood. He taught them about flying, but more about surviving, about never giving up, about finding humanity in inhuman places, about the families who help, the guards who show mercy, the moments of grace in graceless times. Some called him soft. Jack called it honest. The 50s passed. The 60s came. Another war. Vietnam. They didn't ask Jack to fly this time. He was 45. A relic. But they did ask him to teach survival school. escape and evasion, resistance training, preparing boys for possibilities no one should face. He taught them practical things: how to move silently, how to find water, how to signal rescue. But he also taught them harder truths. Your mind breaks before your body. Hope weighs nothing but carries everything. Every guard is someone's son. Every enemy is human. Some of his students came back, told their own stories. Hanoi Hilton, jungle camps, bamboo cages. They'd used his lessons, survived because of what he'd taught. But too many didn't come back. Too many names on a wall that would come later. Too many ghosts. Jack married in 1963, a nurse who'd served in Korea. She understood nightmares, understood silence, understood why he still counted exits in every room, still slept facing the door, still kept a bag packed, just in case. Always, just in case. They had 2 kids, boy and girl. Jack taught them different lessons: how to throw a baseball, how to ride a bike, how to be kind when the world wasn't, how to be strong without being hard, how to remember that freedom meant responsibility. But the past never stayed past. Letters would come from France, a school teacher thanking him for her life, her children, her chance to teach because a young American pilot had escaped to fight again. She'd named her son Jacques, French for Jack, from Korea, harder to trace. But word traveled. Families he'd stayed with, children grown now, grateful, alive, free. They sent pictures, proved that kindness multiplied. That good echoed through generations, that some debts were paid in ways money couldn't measure. From Germany. This surprised him most: children of guards, who'd found his name in their father's journals, wanting to apologize, to understand, to make sense of men who'd been enemies and humans both. Jack wrote back, always. Because understanding mattered more than anger. Even from Japan, a farmer's daughter. Her family had hidden him for one night, fed him rice they couldn't spare. She was a doctor now, saving lives. She said his survival had taught her that life was worth saving. Always, no matter the flag it saluted. These letters were his real medals, proof that survival meant more than just staying alive. It meant showing others that humanity survived too, that war ended, that peace was possible, that enemies could become friends, given time and chance and choice. 1968. They called him to Washington, not for medals this time, for testimony. Congress wanted to know about prisoner treatment, Geneva Convention, how to protect captured Americans. Jack Miller was apparently the expert. 4 times qualified, he sat before senators who'd never heard a shot fired in anger, told them truth they didn't want to hear, that survival wasn't about rules, it was about will, that enemies weren't monsters, they were men, that kindness came from unexpected places, that cruelty did too. What kept you going? A senator asked. What made you escape when others didn't? Jack remembered dark cells, bloody wire, frozen ground, death always one wrong step away. I had promises to keep, he said, to my mother, my crew, myself, but mostly to the people who helped me. Every escape honored their risk, their faith, their proof that good existed even in the worst places. They wanted policy. He gave them humanity. They wanted tactics. He gave them philosophy: survive, escape, return. Not because the manual said so, but because giving up betrayed everyone who'd believed you wouldn't. After Washington, he went back to teaching. But different now, he started a program, connecting former POWs, creating networks, sharing stories. Not the hero stuff, the real stuff, the breakdown moments, the small victories, the ghosts that never left. Vietnam was tearing America apart. Protesters calling soldiers baby killers, veterans coming home to spite instead of parades. Jack watched it all, remembered his own complicated homecomings, the way war changed you, the way home never quite fit again. He spoke at colleges, not recruiting, just talking, about what war really meant, what capture taught you, what escape cost, what survival demanded. Some called him a warmonger, others, a peace activist. Jack called himself a witness, someone who'd seen, who remembered, who refused to forget. Letters kept coming, from his former students, POWs in Vietnam using his lessons, pilots who'd escaped, soldiers who'd survived, each one a small victory, each one proof that knowledge passed on. That experience taught. That one man's story could become another's lifeline. His kids grew. His son became a doctor, his daughter a teacher. Neither chose the military. Jack was glad. They'd found other ways to serve, other ways to matter. The cycle of war could break, should break, would break if enough people chose differently. But Jack kept his bag packed, old habit, hard to break. Because somewhere someone was captured, somewhere someone planned escape, somewhere someone needed to know it was possible. That walls weren't endings, that guards could be evaded, that home could be reached. He'd been captured 4 times, escaped 4 times, each time different, each time the same. The body wanting to quit, the mind refusing, the heart remembering everyone counting on you. Everyone who'd helped, everyone who'd believed. That was the real prison, and the real freedom. Choosing to keep going when stopping made sense. The 70s brought reflection. America coming to terms with Vietnam, Jack Miller coming to terms with himself. He was 55, grandfather now, watching his grandchildren play, wondering what world they'd inherit, what wars they'd face, what prisons they'd escape. He started writing, not memoirs, stories, about the French girl who saved him, the German woman who fed him, the Korean families who hid him, the guards who looked away, the moments when enemies became humans. When war paused for kindness, a publisher found him, wanted the hero story, the great escaper, the man who wouldn't break. Jack gave them something different, stories about everyone else, the helpers, the quiet heroes, the ones who risked everything for strangers. Because that was the story that mattered. The book sold. Not bestseller numbers, but enough. Letters came from readers, veterans who recognized themselves, families who'd lost someone, kids trying to understand their silent fathers, people finding hope in unexpected places. Finding permission to be complicated. He spoke at reunions, POW gatherings, told jokes that only they understood, shared silences that said everything. These men knew, really knew. The weight of survival, the guilt of making it home, the strange gift of seeing humanity's worst and best in the same moment. Some had broken, never recovered. Jack visited them, hospitals, homes, street corners sometimes, because breaking wasn't failure, it was human. And humans deserved dignity, deserved recognition, deserved someone who understood that strength had limits. His wife developed cancer, fought it like a soldier, lost. Jack held her hand at the end, counted her heartbeats like he'd once counted his own, watched her slip away, felt that familiar helplessness. Some prisons had no walls, some escapes were impossible. He grieved like he'd survived. One day at a time, one memory at a time. His children worried. His friends watched, but Jack knew something about enduring, about continuing when continuation felt impossible, about honoring the dead by living. New wars came, small ones, quick ones, America learning to fight differently. Jack watched young soldiers deploy, volunteers now, no draft. Different wars but same faces, same mix of fear and determination, same letters home, same promises to return. He got involved with veterans organizations, not the political ones, the helping ones, suicide prevention, homelessness, PTSD before they called it that, because survival didn't end when you came home. Sometimes that's when the real fight began. One day a package arrived, from France. Inside, a photo. The resistance girl, now a grandmother, surrounded by family. 3 generations of life she'd lived because one American pilot had escaped, had fought, had survived. She'd included a note. You kept your promise, you came back. We never forgot. Jack Miller died in his sleep in 1987, 70 years old. Heart finally gave out, the one that had counted beats in 3 different wars, 4 different prisons. Countless moments when stopping would have been easier than continuing. But it had kept going. Until it didn't. They found him in his study, maps on the walls, not of battles, of escape routes, paths to freedom marked in red, names of helpers written carefully, a geography of kindness in a world of war. His children donated them to a museum. Proof that someone remembered. His funeral surprised everyone. People came from everywhere. France, Germany, Korea, Japan. Families he'd saved, families who'd saved him, veterans he'd taught, students he'd inspired. They came to honor not just a soldier, but a man who'd proved that capture wasn't defeat. That walls weren't permanent, that humans could help humans even when flags said otherwise. His son spoke first, talked about a father who'd taught him that strength meant knowing when to fight and when to forgive. That courage meant getting up one more time than you fell down. That freedom was a responsibility, not just a right. His daughter read from his letters, the ones he'd never sent. To guards who'd shown mercy, to prisoners who hadn't made it, to the ghosts that had walked with him. Apologies, thank yous, promises kept and broken. The words of a man trying to make sense of senseless things. But the most powerful moment came from an old Korean woman, 90 years old, flown in by her grandchildren. She'd been the grandmother who'd hidden Jack, fed him, risked everything for a stranger. She spoke in Korean. Her granddaughter translated. He promised he would remember us. He promised our kindness would matter. He kept that promise. In his books, his teaching, his life. One man's survival became many people's hope. That is how good wins, not in big battles, in small choices, in refusing to break, in helping when helping costs everything. They buried him with military honors, the flag folding, the rifle salute, taps playing, but also with something more. Letters from hundreds of people whose lives he'd touched, whose families existed because he'd escaped, whose freedom had been won by his refusal to accept captivity. His gravestone was simple: name, dates, service record. But his children added one line, a promise and a truth. No prison could hold him. No kindness was forgotten, because that's what Jack Miller taught. That every wall had a weakness. Every guard had humanity. Every escape honored those who helped. That survival meant more than just living. It meant remembering, witnessing, passing on the truth that even in the darkest places light found a way. His story became legend, the man who escaped 4 times. But Jack would have corrected that. He didn't escape alone, ever. The French girl, the German woman, the Korean families, the guards who looked away, the friends who died helping, they all escaped with him, through him, in him. War tries to make us forget we're human. Jack Miller spent his life remembering, teaching others to remember, proving that no matter how many times you're captured, you can always escape. Not just from prisons, from hate, from fear, from the belief that enemies can't become friends. That was his final escape, his greatest. From a world divided by wars to one united by stories, by memory, by the stubborn truth that humans helping humans is the only victory that lasts, the only freedom that matters, the only escape that's permanent. Like the video, subscribe and share your thoughts below. This channel is for those who believe history is made not only by armies, but by individuals.